Hey everyone, Coach Lowry here, and welcome to another session of Conversations with Courageous Cancer Warriors. I am really excited about today's guest because this is a conversation that cannot be missed. We are talking about PTSD, and we will be talking to Tracy Frame Lowry. She is the founder of MultiformPTSD. She is a coach, she is a speaker, she is an author, and she has her own podcast. Amazing. And I almost forgot, she is also a registered nurse. Tracy, thank you so much for being here. You're such a powerhouse.
Oh goodness. Well, thank you for having me. You're so sweet.
I am so excited for this conversation because I think anyone who's gone through any life crisis, especially cancer, whether as a patient or a caregiver, we really are left with a lot of emotions, a lot of trauma, and a lot of PTSD. So talk to me a little bit about what led you to found Multiform PTSD.
Well, working through my own PTSD, I spent decades, I'm fine and not really noticing it, recognizing it, let alone treating it. And because that's kind of how I grew up. My family meant well, but it was very positive as far as everything's fine, you're strong, you can do this. So much so that I thought some of these things were normal because it was just kind of like, you're fine, you're strong. And so it just kind of got swept under the rug, and I was like, oh, okay, this is normal. Okay. And then I had a complete meltdown, and I was at the bottom of this barrel going, how did I get here?
Yeah.
How did I get here? And It was my journey through that I noticed I didn't even think about PTSD because I wasn't at war. So many people think of PTSD and it's for military, it's for those who have gone to war, or even maybe police officers and firemen, but not people who go through other traumas. So I wanted to bring awareness and help those who maybe are in that sector. I talk about focusing on non-military related PTSD because that's what I can attest to. That's what I can talk about. That's what I relate to. I couldn't add good value to a conversation about military PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I could add to that. I would have to do a lot more research to figure it out. And I think there's a lot of good resources out there for them already. So I focus on, because I think there's a lot of people, the more people I talk to, they don't think of PTSD being for people other than military. And with your audience here and cancer, and I had my own cancer scare, and we can talk about that later, but there's so many different ways and different traumas and tragedies that can happen to us that I feel isn't getting validated. And that's really what kind of led me to bring the awareness and to bring some help and support and share the things that I went through to help others through maybe a little bit quicker and more efficiently.
Yeah. And, you bring up a valid point because especially now in this pandemic, this time of a pandemic, we have our healthcare workers that are really affected. And just living everyday life is really trying. And I think a lot of people don't realize the pressure, the stress, just the overall anxiety that is associated with living in the time that we're living in, right? I actually just got back from my oncology appointment, my 3-year follow-up, and I was so nervous going in there, and I was like, why am I nervous? I didn't understand. And I think it was just like the step by steps. Like I showed up, they took my temperature, they then put a screened, like they labeled me screened. And then there's so many additional steps now because of what we're dealing with, that it just adds to the trauma of having to even go and get poked and prodded at the doctor's office to begin with. So I would like to, this is such an important conversation because, we talk about it a lot here where as a cancer patient, we'll talk about patients first, but as a cancer patient, you go through the motions of getting treated, right? You get diagnosed, you're like, oh my God. And then you go through treatment and you're like, now what? And then when you're at that now what point is when you just get flooded with the emotional baggage that you've been carrying this whole time with what you've just gone through. So what would be something, like what would be a tool or something that you can, provide that somebody like me or, our listeners who have gone through such a traumatic time, how would you support them in that?
Being a nurse, I feel like kind of gives me a little bit of both worlds. I know the medical side of things. I know how we're trained and how we're really, I feel like we're pretty good at fixing the physical stuff. Like you said, going and getting your treatment. And if you have surgery and if you have chemo or radiation, we're really good at that kind of a care plan and what to do and boom, boom, boom. I feel like once we get into emotional, mental issues, I feel like there's a lot of gray and not enough help and support. And so actually what I do is, depending on who I'm working with, I will work with healthcare professionals such as yourself, just to kind of help them see. I'm going to tell you a story. I hope I can tell you the story.
Yeah.
My first counselor that I went to after all this, and I'm literally sitting there, I had no makeup on. My hair was a disaster. I probably hadn't showered and I don't even know how long. I was at the bottom of my barrel. And I went in there and all he knew was my name. And he went on his spiel, and in his spiel was, I've worked with prisoners of war. I have worked with those who, have suffered, death and loss of limbs. There is nothing you can tell me that is worse than that. So you need to just suck it up. I was like, okay. And until that point, I was kind of glad he said it later, because before that, the way he was talking to me was very degrading and he called me a coward. And I mean, just really made me feel even worse about myself than I already did.
Talk about tough love.
Yeah. And I'm all about tough love, but I think there's a time and place for it.
Yeah.
That wasn't it.
Yeah. Like kicking you when you're down, right?
Yeah. And I was like, this guy should not be working with people. But then when he said that, my nurse head clicked on, and I went, that's exactly what you do not say. Like, that's 101. You never say that. And so I finally figured out that when it comes to things like PTSD, or when you're dealing with things like abuse or abusive relationships or like covert narcissists, when you're dealing with some of those things, if you haven't experienced it, they just don't quite get it and they don't understand. And so I feel like I was like, okay, I'm going to take my nursing world and me as a patient world, and I'm going to combine them together and hopefully make a better union and understanding between the two, and to help people realize that you need to, if you're not jiving with who your team is or who you're working with, whether it be your doctor or your therapist or a coach, or you need to keep looking. I went through a few different ones, quite honestly, until I found something that worked for me. The other ones were definitely a step up above the first one, but still wasn't necessarily a good vibe. And so it's kind of annoying. So I just want to make sure that people have someone in their corner saying, I get it. Like, I know how you're feeling. I know this is frustrating, but these are the things to do. So I love coaching, and I love being a part of someone's journey of healing from these things. I don't think I don't want to replace, say, a doctor or, a psychologist or anything like that. I want to add to it, especially the part of understanding. So I kind of come at it from that way. So if you're on medication, great, fine. I'm not going to touch anything like that. But bring something different to the table.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Now, you mentioned that you had a scare yourself where you, with cancer. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
I would. It's probably going to come out kind of odd because it kind of came about odd. I was having some digestive issues and they were becoming quite extreme. So we went to the doctor and they did all the normal tests and they were like, we don't like it. So they sent me to a larger city where there was more specialists, and you see a specialist there. And they told me, you have cancer. We don't treat it here because it's very rare. So we're going to send you to this other hospital, which is known for more special cases. It was actually Iowa University Hospital. And they sent me there. And I had really great GI specialists there. I loved them. But it was very physical. And so I was like, okay. So I tried to put my nursing hat on, and okay, so I need to do this and I need to ask this question, and just kind of, preparing, how am I going to prepare my son for this? How am I going to prepare, everyone else, and just trying to figure it out. And then all of a sudden one night I met up with an old friend, and I wasn't going to tell him, and I did. And it was the first time, besides telling like really close, family, I hadn't even told extended, that was like, it just hit me. And I was like, holy cow, this is an emotional issue too. And then all the fear comes in, and I went from being nurse mode into patient mode.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two very different modes.
Oh, yeah.
When you're a nurse, you kind of learn how to not turn off, but kind of just turn on your objectivity. You're being able to just see the facts, and you fix what you can see, and you prioritize. And that's where I was at first. And then it was, holy cow, it was like just a shot to the gut, literally. And I just started to spiral even more. I was already dealing with other post-traumatic stress issues, and then this happened in the middle of all that. It was really not great timing. But it was very scary because it was very rare, and they didn't really know how they were going to treat me yet. They were just kind of in the beginning stages, and we had Christmas. It was over the Christmas holiday, and all my family came in because just in case it was my last one. I mean, we were preparing for the worst. And right after the holidays, and then what?
No, I'm saying, and then what happened? Like after the holidays and.
Yeah. After the holidays, I went back in, and the doctor came in with this just bewildered look on his face. The specialist did, and he said, I'm going to bring in another doctor and talk to you about this too. And I'm like, expecting like, oh my gosh, like what is going on? And he brought in another specialist, and they both told me that they had looked over my case. They looked over my test that day, and it was undetectable. They couldn't find it anymore. It was gone. And they really didn't have any great explanation of how that happened. So I just kind of look up at the heavens and thank you. And I give that one to people beyond the veil for me. But that was a huge whirlwind of emotions, and no one really wanted to talk about that part.
No, and we talk about that a lot here, right? So it's really easy to go through the motions. It's really easy to go through your doctor's appointments, go through your treatments, go through all of that because you have a list, that you know exactly where you need to be at what time, and it's a tangible thing for you to do. The problem with our emotional side is that, like, most people, especially myself, we will push them down, push it down, push it down. And we feel that we need to keep a strong face for everyone. We can't really share a lot of what we have going on. You mentioned that you surprised yourself when you told one of your friends. Like, I was completely opposite. Having worked in oncology for 20 years, when I then found myself like, and I know you could really understand this, like when I found myself on the other side of the table, I didn't know what to do with myself because I was so used to being the person treating somebody else, being in charge and like not being emotionally attached, right? Like, and it sounds awful. And I don't want to say that caregivers, or I mean, healthcare staff don't have emotions, folks. That's not what I mean. We're just trained in a way that it's kind of like
in the moment.
When you're cooking, right? Like you just are thinking about what spices you can add and how can you make this better and how can you, you know, have it be to the best of your ability. Like that's what it's like to work with someone in healthcare. Like we remember it's a person. We make sure that they're taken care of, but it kind of switches over to a different part of our brain where we're going through. We have a list of what a differential that we need to figure out, right? So, so you brought up a huge point, because like somebody like me, I did not tell anybody. I really pissed a lot of people off, I'll be honest with you. I had a core group of people that I told, and I kept it quiet because I could not handle talking about it with people, because I was so traumatized by what I was going through. And I think partially it's because of what I was doing for a career, that I had a hard time having an open conversation about it. And so what that led to was a lot of people getting mad at me. But also I felt I needed to be the strong one. I couldn't show people that I was feeling a certain way. And now, after 2 years, the emotional side just hit me. It hit me and I had to deal with it. So if I am one of your clients and I come to you and I'm at year 2 and I'm like, I am really struggling here, like what is something that you would suggest for me to be able to keep a positive mindset?
Hang with me.
Okay.
To what I'm going to say through the whole thing.
Yeah.
The first thing I would probably say is feel those feelings. I absolutely have found that stuffing feelings will only make them come up 10 times worse at the wrong time. And it can be a real disaster and less than helpful. So I would say give yourself, depending on how new it is and things like that, give yourself an allotted amount of time, whether it be an hour or the rest of the evening, whatever it is. Give yourself some time to grieve and to be scared and to feel sad and to cry and watch the sappy movies, and just, it's okay to feel those, but then don't unpack and stay there. Then you got to find things that help you. I like to really dig into what things make you happy, and really kind of like a football team in a football game. You have to pick, you have all the players, but you're going to pick your top 11, 12 players for that moment, and you pick them. And then sometimes one may not be working for you, or for whatever reason it's not possible. You might have to sub in something else, but you have to have a plan. You have to have a care plan, right? And everyone's different because everyone's trauma is different. So our treatment's going to be different. And, in the health field, we all know everyone reacts to physical and emotional things completely differently. But things like, things that helped me and that I've had other people do, I've had people go out and yell at the cows in the field. So I feel like, feel them, and then you gotta cry it out, yell it out, run it out, punching bag it out, whatever you got to do, you got to feel it, and then you got to try and just get it out. Give it a voice, whatever that means to you, get it out.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And then you kind of have to filter your environment and the people within it. So if you've got people who are, like you said, people got mad at you. I mean, everyone reacts to this kind of a thing differently, but people getting mad at you, or maybe the way they treat you afterwards, or there's going to be toxic people in our life, and there's toxic decisions that we make, and there's toxic things in our environment that maybe whether it be as simple as air quality or just the things that you watch and listen to, like what you're watching on Netflix or TV, what you're listening to music wise. You really have to kind of filter out, at least in the beginning, you have to really, really have a nice fine filter, and you just surround yourself with those things that are positive for you, that make an impact on you positively, that can give you laughter and smiles through a really hard time. And then those that don't, you either eliminate them from your life completely or you limit their access to you. You don't answer the phone every time they call. You don't, you don't meet for lunch every week like maybe you used to. You got to take care of yourself. Self-care is huge. And whatever that looks like, we just kind of figure it out. Because I love yoga. I have a client that hates yoga. So I'm not going to tell her, why don't you go do 10 minutes of yoga and, just kind of meditate on some things or pray. And I'm not going to tell her that. It's not going to help her.
Right.
But someone like me and another one of my clients, they love yoga. They're all about exercising. And so I'm going to tell them to do completely different things because it's about what is going to work for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then you just flood with as much good, positive, I would watch Kevin Hart, a comedian, anything to make you laugh, smile, feel joy as much as you possibly can. And eliminate what you can out that doesn't.
And it's one of those things of, I'm happy that you brought that up because I remember turning the TV on and I remember like buying a movie, not really knowing what it was about. And then like the first 5 minutes, it was about cancer. And I just remember turning it off. I'm like, this is supposed to be like, I was angry. I'm like, this is supposed to be my escape. This is what I said,
Oh, no.
I felt surrounded by it, to the point that I went to documentaries, Animal Planet shows, and Practical Jokers. Like that's what I went to.
Yes.
Whatever worked, whatever would calm the brain. So that's really good. What you offer, and what you've mentioned are really good techniques and tools for people that they can use. Now, on behalf of all of us here, we hate that you went through the scare that you went through, but we're also really happy that you didn't have to continue on with anything in that journey. So please don't ever be like, feel sad or whatever negative emotion, if there is one, because it's something we definitely don't want to have anybody experience. And
that's funny you say that, because as I was talking, knowing your audience, I was sitting here thinking like there's like some survivor's guilt going on here, right? Like I felt kind of bad saying, but now it's gone. We don't know why. I mean, I feel kind of trite about it, but I don't feel that way. But there is like a survivor's guilt thing. So thank you. I appreciate that.
No, absolutely. And part of it too is that there's survivor guilt on multiple levels, right? Like I was diagnosed as a stage 2. And then when I talk to my stage 4, friends, I feel really guilty that they have, a worse diagnosis than I do. And it's at multiple levels, and it's really everywhere. So that's why we are definitely a group of people that we love hard on each other, but we don't really want to include a lot of people in this group. We'd rather have you not know what it feels like, even though you went through it, like you got that scare and you're like, oh my God. So we're always really thankful that, I know that I'm very thankful you didn't have to do anything more with that. So how can people find you? Because your work is so important.
Bless your heart. Thank you so much. Probably the easiest place would be my website, and you can get to everything else from there. And it's just www.multiformptsd.com. And the way to remember it, I like to say it's multiform because PTSD has no uniform. That's why it's multiform. So that kind of helps people remember what and why it is. But I've got a podcast on there and the links on there. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Multiform PTSD. Again, it's all pretty uniform. My podcast goes on audio podcast platforms as well as YouTube. We're getting YouTube starting to kind of build up. If you go to the YouTube channel, it's great. It's a work in progress. Hang with us. We're getting more info on there as much as we can, as quick as we can. But and then I am doing, I'm a speaker as well. I like to go. We aren't doing many events right now, but I've done a couple virtual ones because that's, you know, that's the way life is right now, right? A lot of schools don't want people coming in and speaking, so that's fine. Right. But and then I do have some coaching availability as well right now, and all of that, like I said, is on the website. It's pretty simple, easy cut, because I know those that have PTSD, for whatever reason, sometimes your brain just doesn't, you can't focus for long, you can't read a lot of information. So I try to make it as simple and easy as I could, so it could kind of help everyone and get in touch with me. So
that's
and
awesome.
Thank you so much for what you are doing, because you're touching a group that, like you said, you don't want a lot of people to be a part of it. And that way I feel kind of the same. I don't wish anyone to want to come talk to me, because that means you've been through tragic things, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But thankfully they have you and me, and people who have been there understand. I feel like healing can really start once you feel validated and heard.
Absolutely.
So I commend you for what you do as well.
And the feeling is mutual. Thank you for who you are, for this community here that we have, and also for the world. Like, honestly, we need you, and we need this conversation to really be at the forefront of, you know, of part of our healing journey. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.